Hello, my name is Joe Brown. I am an artist blacksmith, and some of you may be wondering, what does that really mean? Blacksmiths in old days, back up until really about the 1930s, had a strong presence in our local communities, especially rural communities, but even in cities. They repaired a lot of equipment. Of course, in the horse-drawn era, they shoed horses, they made certain parts of farm equipment and things like that. In the modern era, I started blacksmithing about 26 years ago, and there's been a bit of a resurgence in the last, I'd say, 30 plus years into blacksmithing, quite an interest. And a lot of people who get involved do what I do, which is called being an artist blacksmith. In other words, we take basically steel. You may hear it referred to as ironwork, but we really work with steel these days. And we transform that into something that is something that's not only functional, but has an artistic value to it. Some of that can be as simple as a paper towel holder for your kitchen. It's very utilitarian, but it also has a very unique look to it. I put different toppers on my paper towel holders, really to suit the client. Sometimes a chili pepper will be on top, or a musical treble clef, something like that. So I'm very driven toward my customers' needs. I do this full time, so I do a variety of different projects. I also do a lot of blending of hammer and anvil work, and I blend that with fabricated projects such as gates, railings, things such as that. I make a lot of fireplace tools and fireplace doors, and I do light fixtures. I do cabinetry, pulls, and hardware. So just a variety of things. I'm very customer driven. What I worked on today, I just did some demonstrations on some components. I have got a client who is wanting two sculptural pieces. Those pieces will be about 22 inches tall, something about like this. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually forging the components for that sculpture, which is the way I work. I generally will come up with a concept with a client. We'll kind of do a rough sketch on the workbench or something like that. And what I'll take these components, I'll forge them out, and then I weld them to a base or whatever they're going on. And a lot of times I'll manipulate them in the final process with an oxygen acetylene torch. I'll do a lot of that to do the fine tweaking. I do a lot of floral elements in my work. It's probably the major component in my forgings are leaves, flowers, and a variety of fauna. So working on today, you'll see some pieces that I took a long skinny rod and forged what's called a tendril on top. A tendril is just a little twisted, I call a little curlicue, that's a technical term, that I forge, and I'll manipulate those in the sculpture. Some of the other components I'm looking at over here on my table, I did some flowers like you'll see on this sculpture. Those are little round discs that I texture in a variety of ways and literally drive them into a piece of pipe to make a nice attractive flower. I forge leaves. A lot of my leaves are forged out of half-inch square bar. I start with half-inch square bar and work that down to a leaf form and manipulate it. And I do a lot of leaves. I've made literally thousands upon thousands of leaves in my career, and they all go in different kinds of pieces, whether it be a light fixture, a fireplace screen, gates, any number of places. I build a lot of my own tools. I make a lot of my own tongs. I also have got purchased tongs that I'll buy from shops that go out of business and things like that. I like old tools. They still work fine. Sometimes I reshape them to meet my needs. But a lot of my tools and my tongs that I use a lot of times I've made myself, which is an advantage in doing what I do. You can just take the time. If you need a tool, you just make it. So that's kind of a fun part of the job right there. This is a power hammer. In days gone by, we had what referred to as a trip hammer. They were usually the earliest form was a large stone set to a wooden beam, and they would have a water wheel or some mechanism to basically bring that hammer head up and drop it down. The reason it was called a trip hammer. This is a pneumatically operated hammer, and if you saw in the video, you'll see where I use my foot to control the amount of air that goes to the hammer. And I built this to meet my needs, so this is custom built, and it has about a 90-pound, what we call head or hammer on it, and that cycles up and down with a pneumatic cylinder that's inside the hammer right here. In my anvils, I have a 330-pound Czechoslovakian anvil. This actually came from the Czechoslovakia. It's called a double pick anvil. It's got a double bick. It's got a horn on one end and another tapered bick coming out the other end. It also has a little shelf that goes out one side. This anvil was developed by and for artist blacksmiths. It gives you a lot more options in where you can hammer versus my other anvil, which has got where I made the flower earlier. It's just what we call an English pattern anvil, and it's about 175 pounds. These were both new anvils. I purchased them both new, one in 1998 and one in 2003. I also, in this piece, used basically some long, drawn-out, for lack of a better word, just fronds or leaves, basically. I do an iris sculpture. I don't have one in the gallery at this time, but on my iris sculptures I use a lot of these. So I use basically some 1/2-inch angle iron on this particular sculpture that I'm going to be making, and I do texturing to it, and then actually as I hammer it, the shape kind of takes form, because anytime you heat a piece of metal, something's got to move and go somewhere. So as I'm forging those out, they kind of naturally curve and they kind of naturally twist. So that's another component that we find in this sculptural piece. All of my work is done in the forge behind me. I think you can see it. There's a forge behind me. I use mainly propane to heat my forge. I custom built this forge for myself, really to fit my needs. I worked in coal for about 10 years, and I still teach classes in coal when the need arises. But mainly for my work nowadays, I work almost everything in propane and use that, and I use my oxygen acetylene torch to do a lot of heating if needed for spot treatments. So that about kind of tells you what I'm working on today, the components, and I'll show you this piece here in just a minute. In the United States today, there are thousands of full-time smiths. I don't know if there's 10,000 full-time smiths. I don't know what that number is. There are a lot of blacksmiths, though, who do this as a hobby. Blacksmithing organizations are alive and well in this country, and a lot of people just like to do it on the side and do it as a hobby, like working on their car or doing woodworking. It is an art form that takes a special tolerance to heat. It's not something you can do in the air conditioning. I don't know of any. There may be some air-conditioned blacksmith shops. You're just creating so much heat. Now, on the fabrication side, you can get by with fabricating as long as you've got good air filtration. My shop, I use, I heat in the wintertime with a wood stove and some propane. And in the summer, I basically just open all the doors and I use a exhaust fan to get the heat and dust out in the summertime. So it gets pretty hot here. It can regularly be in the forge area over here in the summer. Right around the forge within 5 or 6 feet, it can regularly be over 120 degrees or more. I've gotten it up over to 130, and that's pretty brutal. You just drink a lot of water when you do that. But there are a lot of good blacksmiths all around the country, very talented, men and women. I always tell ladies who take my classes or that I talk to, this is not just a men's art. Some of the best blacksmiths I know are women. They have a great eye and they got great hammer control, and they don't just do small projects. They work on some really big things. So and no matter who you are and no matter your skill level, you can find something to do in blacksmithing if it's something you enjoy. I recommend getting involved in a local blacksmithing organization through the ABANA is a national organization, Artist Blacksmith Association of North America. their resources can attach you to different forges that are operating throughout the country. And that's a good place to go and get started. I got into blacksmithing like about 1995, right in there. I was actually looking for a career change. Was in the automotive manufacturing. I was a mechanic for 20 years. I was in maintenance management for 5 years of that. And I really missed working with my hands when I got into management. I just wanted to work with my hands, and I wanted to work from home. So my wife and I were just talking and looking at things, and through a series of circumstances, I got involved in a local blacksmithing organization in Rutherford County. And that kicked, the first night I went, I remember it very well. I went in and I made a hook the very first night. And I was already used to working with my hands. I could already weld. I already used a torch. I knew how to heat and bend things. But I guess I have an artistic eye, people tell me. I have the ability just to kind of look at things and figure them out. And that's, you know, everybody doesn't have that, but a lot of people do. So I'm not special in that way. It's just the way God made me. And so in that, I thought, man, this is great. So I brought a hook home, a little S hook that I made, and showed it to my wife. And I told her that night, it was the first night I went, I said, this is what I want to do for a living. And 3 years later, I left my corporate job and started working for myself. And I've been doing this now for 22 years, going on 23 years. This is the piece I was speaking about that I developed for a class that I teach, which is a use of florals in sculpture. And in those classes, I teach the students how to do a variety of floral components. These are some of the things that I made for like this sculpture that I made earlier in the video. So I just made the same component. You can see what that looks like there. This one is actually held on with a mortise and tenon joint that I did on that. Also on this sculpture here we have tendrils, and they can come in a variety of sizes, and that's another thing that we demonstrated. So basically when I make all these components, then I can put them into a variety of sculptures. The other thing that I talked about was leaves, and you can see there's a lot of leaves on this component. And what I'll do is I make the leaves, and then I forge whatever vine or stem I want, and I weld them, and then I dress those welds out and make them blend in. So you can see how the components kind of come together. This base was just a square piece of steel. It was very simple. For the students, I just wanted them to have something simple to do. And we basically hammered this into what's called a swags block, which is a large piece of steel with shapes in it, and then made the 4 feet for it. So, and then here's another leaf with some texture on it that you can see. So that's, and you'll see that as we look around the gallery. My gallery is open by appointment, so it's a place I can showcase my work. And I have clients that come in, and they'll come in about a project. And what I think amazes a lot of people, it's not that I do this work, it's that this kind of work exists. Because a lot of people don't see custom forged pieces. They're used to seeing mass-produced metal work. And what I offer in the artistic realm is to take make steel not look static. That's one of my purposes. I want to make it look like it's growing. I want to make it look like it has movement. If it's a bird or a fish, I want it to look like it's going somewhere. I don't want this just this stark, flat piece of steel. So that's what I can accomplish in this, and just showing you the parts that can be made, how this little sculpture can come together. To see more of my work or contact me, go to joebrownblacksmith.com, and on the website you'll have many categories you can choose from to see the various types of metal work that I do. You can also reach out to me on Facebook at Joe Brown Artist Blacksmith.